Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplement material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild Magic Item Compendium, Mordenkainen's Tome of Marvelous Magic, designed by MT Black for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Grayson, and Chris. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy, Yuma, Marcos, Dave, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, A.K., Sir 2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Ross, and Lippy Spuds. Thank you all very much for your support. Mordenkainen's already has his Tomb of Foes. And this is the Tomb of Marvelous Magic, which includes 200 new magic items. Now, I've reviewed a number of magic item compendiums before. Some of them have a theme. Some of them are just, here's a bunch of magic items we come up with. This one, the specific theme, was not readily apparent until I was about halfway through it. And I realized that it is specifically focusing on wondrous items, which is to say, objects that are not weapons or armor. So these are like magical instruments and beads and globes and gloves and glasses, blankets, bones, just any kind of pipes, magical thing that is not a weapon and not a suit of armor pretty much qualifies to be included in here. As I mentioned, 200 is a pretty damn good number. It's very professionally laid out and organized, which I expect from MT Black. It uses nothing but stock art, which is disappointing. So we're not going to get any original artwork in here. Generally, I'm very positive on this entire compendium. I thought that once I realized what it was doing with the theme was like, okay, these are not, I'm not going to find any swords or daggers. We're going to see like 5 different kinds of harps, for example. In fact, if you are wanting a magical instrument for a bard, holy crap, this has literally the best selection of magical instruments I have ever seen in a magic item compendium. I will go ahead and declare that right now. Absolutely incredible with the number of things, whether it's a flute or a harp or a damn xylophone at the end, which is awesome, or a horn that summons zombies. Really, really cool ideas for instruments in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. With 200, you're generally going to get a quantity over quality approach, but there was a bunch of items that I really, really enjoyed. Yes, there are some that are kind of like, okay, fine, that are basically just slight variations on things that already exist between the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I believe Xanathar's has a few items in there. So you will get some of that, but for the most part, I think these are actually pretty clever. And again, once I realized that these are all wondrous items, then it made sense that we would be getting a few that were very similar in design, but still some really cool ideas. And typically when I review one of these, I kind of highlight some of my favorites to show off maybe the best of what this can offer. I don't know what the ratio is in terms of ones that I really liked versus ones that I was kind of met on, but I would say probably at least half of them I was generally very positive on, and that's 100 items. So I don't really want to ever knock a compendium for giving me too much stuff for the most part. But I do wish we could get away from this huge quantity approach. I realize, having a big number is a nice selling point on a product page, but very rarely is anybody going to ever offer that number of things that are real quality stuff. So, I don't know of anybody that could come up with 200 really high quality, awesome, interesting magic items. Like, you're going to maybe get like 25 that are super, super cool and then kind of fill out the rest. And then whatever the ratio is what we're going to get. But for the most part, I think this is a pretty positive ratio, and I generally liked what I read. A lot of products in the DM's Guild like to personalize them by having a name, so and so's thing, which is definitely kind of copying off the style that Wizards does, which is creating, Volo's Guide to Monsters and Xanathar's Guide to Everything, where it's from a in-universe person. A lot of them, however, drop the ball in that they just use the title and then don't use the person throughout. In this case, Mordenkainen is found throughout the compendium with these little asides, and I really do like this addition because it helps personalize the entire thing over just having, bog standard rules on all of them. And it's unfortunate we don't really get flavor text on any single one of these items aside from the Mordenkainen commentary, but I do like the Mordenkainen commentary. Now that comes with a caveat, which is a kind of a big one, and that is this cursive script is not cool. This is very challenging to read. Granted, I'm looking at it at, I think the default is like 78%, so this is the read view I use. So it would look more like this, but still, I have to sit there and it takes me a second, whereas I can read, obviously the English language fairly quickly. Cursive, it's kind of like decoding almost. Where you have to kind of look at it a few times to figure out, okay, here's what this word is. And it's just annoying. Like I get that you want to personalize it and make it like a handwritten note, but use a different font. Don't use straight up really cursive ass looking cursive. It doesn't translate very well to actually allowing somebody to read it, and it just makes it kind of almost where I don't want to read it, which is a bummer because I think it's really fun flavor text, and it a few times made me smile and maybe not quite belly laugh, but was very enjoyable to have that extra personalized commentary throughout. But having it in this font style is just a bummer, so I wasn't a big fan of that. All right, so stuff that I liked, the Blanket of Healing, I believe starts right here. Is a rare item that if you cover yourself with the blanket while taking a short rest, you can regain your max number of hit points for any hit dice you spend, so you don't have to really roll hit dice. There is a bone of animation that's just a femur bone that you throw and can turn into a skeleton. It's very nice. The Bugle of Reviving, which is the horn. I picture that, and it just raises up a bunch of zombies around you out of the grave. That's very cool. A lot of really cool instruments, as I mentioned. Very, very fun. The Cage of Entrapment is basically a Pokeball, which is pretty cool, although you still have to feed them, which I don't think you have to worry about that in Pokemon. The Cane of Detection, I really like the way it's flavored, where you actually have to walk and tap it on the ground, and then in a 20-foot radius, any traps will glow. I love the appeal of this, somebody walking around tapping a cane to try and figure out where the traps are. Notice how it is laid out very professionally. It looks like it's ripped right out of, a Xanathar's or Dungeon Master's Guide, which is nice. But I'm not as big a fan of the artwork being just straight stock art from D&D. Obviously, that is totally your prerogative. If it's on the DM's Guild, it's what it's there to be used for. But I don't know, as somebody that's opened and stared at those pictures for a long time because I'm constantly referencing those magic items, it's a bummer to just kind of see that repeated here. Granted, this is better than not having art for sure, but it would have been nice to see actual new art in here. I'm even recognizing some of the art and again, you've got gloves, you're just going to put the glove, I think it's like the arrow snaring gloves or maybe the spider gloves or something. It's disappointing to see just straight up stock art used for every single page. I am glad we've got the Mirror of Life trapping right there. I'm glad that we have art, but it's a bummer to see just repeated art throughout. The Cube of Abilities is literally a 6-sided dice your players can find. They roll it, and then that determines what permanent stat boost they get, which could be good or it could be weird depending on what they roll, I suppose. The Deck of Change, same thing as kind of like almost a wild magic thing. You get to draw a card and some random crazy thing happens. The Doven of Divination, which is one of those weird little kind of like footbed couch things, I think. If you rest on it, you can be visited by a angelic being. I just think that's and Black does some really funny alliterative and just funny punny names of items, and that was one of them I just thought was really clever. The Quill of Necromancy, this is a really cool idea. We're going to skip ahead to, what page was that on? 23. You write down a bunch of questions and then place it on top of a dead creature, and then that creature can answer three. So you write down 3 questions, and then the dead thing can answer those questions. I just love the flavor that you actually have to write down on this parchment, and then that's what's used to actually write your questions down. So that could force your players to really decide. And what's fun is if you're playing, real tabletop D&D, have somebody sit there and write it down, write the questions down, then you as the DM can sit there and read it. So those are the kind of ideas I really like. They're just clever and interesting. And because these aren't your typical, it's a +1 sword that does lightning damage or whatever, these are really extra clever, interesting ideas. Not all of them are that cool. Some of them, a Rake of Smoothing. You can smooth your tracks behind you. Should that even be a magic item? And some of them are common too, which tells me they are barely magic items. They just do silly things like, light up or something, or there's literally something you can fill up with wine and I think it just lights up an area, or there's some like chalice that you can pour, or a bottle that you can pour liquids into and it will tell you what It'll basically identify potions for you. And some of it are items that I wouldn't necessarily use in my campaign because we don't keep track of that stuff. For example, there's like a scroll case that can hold an unlimited amount of scrolls in it, or there's stuff that makes you less encumbered. We don't worry about encumbrance in my kind of game. So some of the magic items are not even applicable to my games, but I can appreciate that they are at least trying to cover the gamut of doing all these different tasks and all these different abilities using a bunch of magic items that are not your typical, swords and shields and bows and things like that. Finally, I want to highlight the Xylophone of Xenomorphy. This is another fantastically alliterative magic item that you can use to transform opponents, or I guess allies, into an aberration. Again, really, really awesome a source of magical instruments. Bards, rise up, because there are bugles, there are horns, there are harps, there's our bagpipes. All of them do different. There's drums. They all have different effects. They do like magic spells, or have like one-time spell uses, or some cool thing going on. But there's all kinds of cool that aren't quite as like weirdly imbalanced as the instruments that are in the Dungeon Master's Guide are. So I think they're a lot more interesting and varied. Another huge pro here is we get magic item tables, D100 lists by rarity, which is very helpful because that's basically by like tier of D&D play, or something that could be on a regular opponent, or you could find and give out pretty easily, versus something that would be like at the end of a dungeon. And as you can see by these tables, they skew towards the uncommon and rare, which is good. That's how I think magic items should lean toward in terms of the rarity. I think that obviously legendary items are extremely rare, and there should not be very many of them because they can be game changers and be like at the end of a whole campaign, or be the focus of a campaign or something. And similar with very rare. So I like that most of the items tend to fall in uncommon and rare, and it's nice that we get tables here that at least, even if I'm not going to use this as a literal D100 table for a loot table, it lets me as the DM just glance through here and be like, okay, by level, which of these should I actually be looking at? So I really appreciate this organization, especially because the beginning, as you can see here, it has a table of contents, but it doesn't even have a page, which is odd. So it's technically not a table of contents. It's just a list of items alphabetically. So there's no kind of organization whatsoever until we actually jump into it. So I really appreciate that we got the tables at the end, which helps organize all of these items by rarity and lets me see, okay, where exactly, what kind of items should I be giving my players at this kind of level. So overall, I think it's got some really fun ideas. For the most part, I'm very positive on these items. I think, and the ones that I wasn't as positive on were just kind of more of the low level, low magical, maybe common items that really didn't have much going on about. Wrestling oil, you cover yourself in like grease. You have advantage on escaping grapples. Like, I'm pretty sure there's similar items you can find in the Dungeon Master's Guide for a lot of these, and it's even worse that you can literally see the same art in the Dungeon Master's Guide as well as through whatever other official D&D source books. But there is a lot of good stuff here. For the most part, I was very positive. I enjoyed especially the focus on wondrous items versus the usual mix of very powerful, offensive weaponry of different kinds. You won't see a single sword in here out of 200 items, which is pretty damn impressive, I think. You will find like 40 different magical instruments, which for someone who loves bards and music and magical instruments in D&D, I think that is friggin' awesome. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Mordenkainen's Tome of Marvelous Magic. Pros: a professional layout and design. Cool cover, by the way. Very nicely put together. You could see it could slot just as easily in the Dungeon Master's Guide in terms of the way it's organized with all the items. Pretty stock standard. We'll get to my con about the art later, but in terms of the actual organization, the font, everything is great. Pro: 200 wondrous magical items as opposed to weapons and armor. So not only do we get a ton of magic items here, but I do really appreciate that it focuses on actual items and not weapons and armor. Very, very cool. Pros: the D100 loot tables organized by rarity. Very nice to have because a lot of magic items don't have tables and don't organize them by rarity. And pro: fun commentary by Mordenkainen, with the caveat that I'm going to get into my con about it, but I do like that this effort was given. Not only is it a completely written in-universe prologue basically to this entire item. This is basically Mordenkainen showing you his vault of items, which I think is cool. We do get some running commentary throughout, not obviously for every item, but we do get a couple bits for every page, which is really fun to have, and I think adds a lot of much needed personality because none of the items otherwise have any flavor text on them. Cons, you've already guessed them. Art is reused from the Dungeon Master's Guide or other D&D source books. That's a bummer to have. Again, I like that we have art, but it just seems like using the D&D stock art is just like the bare minimum. And then con, the cursive script for the Mordenkainen commentary is really a challenge to read, and it's a bummer because it's a really good idea, and I like that it's here. I just wish, and I like the idea of having a more personalized script and have it be a lot different than the normal font. Just don't use this like strict of a cursive. Like it really is just challenging for me to, and maybe it's just me. Maybe in the commentary you say, Eric, you're fucking crazy. Like this is no problem. I got no problem reading cursive. That's fine. But it was a problem for me. Final verdict, Mordenkainen's Tome of Marvelous Magic features a large variety of new wondrous items, from magical blankets and chalices to the xylophone of xenomorphy. I do really like that one especially. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.